Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So long time no video. Oh no. So I just moved back to America like a month ago or like a month and a half ago. And it's been it's not been like a really intense transition because I'm used to living in America, but it's just been a lot of stuff we had to do, like getting a new apartment, furnishing a new apartment. So I've just been hella busy, but I really missed repainting dolls. So I figured I might as well get back into doll repainting with a doll that I've been really wanting to do. I'm sure you guys have seen Delightful, Doll Fairy, Moonlight Jewel dolls, and Dalmatians Pokemon dolls. They're like so good. So if you haven't seen them, I'll link all those people down below and you should just go check them out. But I wanted to create a doll inspired by those because I really like those videos and I also really like Pokemon, like pretty much everyone. So I had to kind of think about it because I feel like I have a lot of favorite Pokemon, but I feel like the experience that kind of stuck most with me is playing Pokemon as a small child, like 6 or 7. I was like obsessed with Pokemon as a kid. I still really like Pokemon, but I played Pokemon Red and I went into Mount Moon and I encountered a Clefairy, and I remember just seeing it and being like, what is that? Because it was like so pink and so cute and had fairy in the name, and I don't know, my little girl self, it just really spoke to me. So I just wandered around for hours trying to encounter another one, and I think for that reason Clefairy is my favorite Pokemon. So I wanted to create a Clefairy doll. I wanted a couple specific things for this doll. So I wanted her to have a chubby face, I wanted her to have a smiling face mold, and I wanted her to have pink skin. So I knew I had 2 different options to go with for the base doll. I could either go with Farragood Fairy or Reboot Draculaura. Now I only have one Farragood Fairy and I've been kind of hoarding her a little bit. Also, I've been painting quite a few Ever After High dolls kind of in a succession of each other. So I decided to go with Reboot Draculaura because she's a Monster High doll and I have like 3 of her. So I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of a comparison between the original and Reboot Draculaura dolls. So she's quite different from the original. The Reboot is. Her face mold is totally different. She's smiling with the Reboot. Whereas the original is doesn't really have an expression on her face. They're both really nice. I think it just depends on what you want for a doll repaint. And also her body is totally different. I prefer the Reboot body because the original it just looks kind of painful, and the Reboot is a little bit more realistic with its proportions. And the face paint is obviously quite different with these dolls. Specifically, I decided to go with this Ballerina Ghouls Draculaura. It was like one of the last Monster High dolls that Mattel released. She has white molded on tights, and I thought that this would break up the pink on pink on pink that she's inevitably going to get. We start with the basics of cutting off all her hair. Normally I prefer to heat up the vinyl of the head with hot water to pop the head off, but since we just moved in, I'm kind of lacking a couple things. I don't have a kettle, so I decided to use a blow dryer. This works fine, but I prefer soaking in hot water. I just feel like it warms it up more and gets the glue looser. To get all the hair plugs out, I scrape around the inside of the head with a screwdriver and pull the glue chunks out through the neck hole with needle nose pliers. With 100% acetone, I remove the factory paint. This is my first time seeing Draculaura's Reboot face mold, and it really is adorable. To reroot her hair, we're using 100% acrylic yarn, and you have to prep acrylic yarn to reroot with it, or at least that's my method, so I'm going to show you guys what I do. But I just cut it off into random strands. I just kind of eyeball the length of each one of them. Once I have a bunch cut off, I tie them around this. Okay, so you guys have deemed this thing to be a scarf holder in the shape of brass knuckles. So that's what I'm going with. I'm tying it to that. And I basically fill up this whole thing with yarn, and then once I'm done filling it up, I brush out the yarn with a cat brush. I start at the bottom and I work my way up to the top. Once the hair is all brushed out, I straighten it with a hair straightener, and then I soak the hair in fabric softener for about 10 minutes. And yes, that is a pan. I need to buy things. We don't have anything since we moved from Kuwait to the US, so I'm using a pan to soak it in. I got this method from Doll Links, by the way, the fabric softener soaking yarn method. I'll link her down below. I really like her videos. But once the hair is all soaked and then once it's rinsed, I straighten it again with a hair straightener, and then it's all ready to be re-rooted with. Something that I realized after plugging a lot of her head was that I forgot to make her ears, and Clefairy has ears. So whoopsie daisies, we're gonna make them now. I decided to make them with, what is this, paper clay? It's just a really lightweight clay, and I just made some little blobby shapes and then sanded them down to look a little bit more accurately like her ear shape, and it ended up working out pretty well. But once they're all dry and sanded down, I circled where they're gonna be on the head so that I don't plug that area. Once I traced the shape onto the head, I painted the ears pink and brown with acrylic paint. This is the finished product. Once I'm done painting, I take matte varnish and I put 2 coats of that on the ears. With Fabri-Tac glue, we just squeeze some into the neck hole rather kind of violently. And then I just let that sit overnight. Now onto the face up. Woo, my favorite part. So I spray the doll 3 times with Mr. Super Clear, letting it dry for 15 minutes between each spray, and then I start to sketch out the eyes. So I think the eyes are the most important part of the face up, so I don't know, that's why I always start with them. I'm also really just excited to start in that area because I like drawing eyeballs. I sketch out the eyes with a red watercolor pencil. Once I am done sketching out the initial shape of the eyes, I do my next favorite step, which is adding copious amounts of blush on the cheeks, the nose, and the forehead with pink pastel. With Draculaura, even though she has a really pink skin tone, I feel like if you shade her face with more normal skin tone colors like browns and stuff like that, her skin can get less pink, and I wanted to emphasize that pink color, so I shaded her face with mostly purples. I also add a lot of blue like all around her face. And I got a comment like a month ago or a while ago, whatever. And it basically said like, you add too much blue to your face ups, and I do, but I like it. Okay, it's like a stylistic choice. All the skin tones have blue in them, but it's probably more of a stylistic choice because I do add a little bit more than probably most skin tones have. But let me live like my blue life, you know, like I like it. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. Now for another face up obsession of mine. I'm adding splattered on freckles to her face with purple and pink paints. I cover up her eyes because I don't want any of the splatter to get in that area. And if you guys like mess up a freckle, you can go in with a Q-tip and kind of like wipe it away while it's still wet. If y'all haven't come around these parts often, I like to add veins to my dolls, so that's what I'm doing right now with a light blue colored pencil. Let's talk about Clefairy's eyes. So I always thought that they were black, but it turns out, according to this specific artwork, which seems to be rather, I guess, detailed portrait from the people who made Pokemon, that her eyes are blue and then they have like a black gradient on top. So it's like a blue to black gradient. So that's what we're going to be doing for her eyes. So I start out with a gray color to sketch them out, and then I fill them in with like a light blue going into a dark gray. I think this is around layer 2 of spraying on MSC. Just as a reference, if you guys are new to repainting dolls, basically just spray on MSC whenever you can't build up any more color. At about this point, I start layering on the highlights. So I go like around the eyes, the upper lip, the forehead, the chin with white and cream watercolor pencils and pastels. For the gradient happening in the eyes, so I begin the gradient with, or like laying down some initial colors with watercolor pencils, and then I go in with a Q-tip and pastels, in this case a dark blue pastel, and I kind of flick that into the light blue of the watercolor pencils, and I just feel like it gives me honestly kind of like a faster gradient than I could get with layering on watercolor pencils. I also dab on the iris with a Q-tip and black pastels because it gives me a more softer iris, which I like, as opposed to a harsh circle with black watercolor pencil. To give this doll a more softer look, or like a more innocent look, I don't know, just didn't want to make her eyes so harsh, I added the lower lashes in with a dark brown watercolor pencil as opposed to a black. I did the upper lashes with black, but yeah, I just feel like it gives her a softer look. Now for paint. So once I start adding in paint, it's basically the last couple steps of the face up. I'm just going over the lashes to make the lashes look a little bit more defined. I also add a little bit of metallic blue paint to the top of the pupils. I just like the way it looks. I also add a little bit of metallic pink paint to the waterline and the lips to make them look like glossy and juicy. That's actually a little gross. juicy waterline, ew. But anyway, also her eyebrows are like half eyebrows because I just thought it added to her cutesy aesthetic. The white paint highlights are basically the very last step of the face up. So I add those around the lips, the inner tear duct, on top of the iris, waterline. I add them in a ton of places. It's basically wherever, like, this really kind of brings together and finishes the face. So wherever you want to draw attention to is where you would add these highlights, and also wherever light would hit. So I think a really good thing, if you just get into face ups and you're like completely confused, maybe you're not super familiar with art or something, is to look at a lot of portraits, because that's sort of how you figure out where light hits a face. I felt kind of obligated to add Clefairy's cutesy little oval blushy cheek mark things, so I did. And I put the little, I don't know what these things are called, but they're like the kawaii anime quotation mark highlights on the cheeks. If y'all are familiar with anime, you've probably seen these before. I don't know what they're called, but I added them to her face. And then I put gloss on her lips. On to clothes, woo! So I knew I wanted her to have like a kind of round silhouette, since Clefairy's all like cute and chubby and stuff. So I gave her a baby doll dress. Now on to sewing, the part that I'm not very good at. Oh no. So the first thing that I do is I add a hem onto her neckline and also the back of the dress, the back of the top of the dress where the clasp will go. I sew the front and the back of the top of the dress good side to good side at the top of the shoulders. Now onto the skirt. So I gather stitch the top of the skirt. Now for the ruffles. So I had 3 strips of fabric that I just gather stitched to get ruffles, and I really like sewing ruffles. I dig it. So the first one is the smallest strip of fabric, and I sewed that to the top of the skirt, and then it went like in succession of size. So the middle tier was the medium one, and then the bottom tier was the largest strip of fabric, and I just sewed those to the original skirt piece. I decided that this dress needed a little something something, so I added an underskirt in tulle. This pink tulle that I bought looks just magical in the camera. I layered it up with 2 layers of tulle. I sewed the top of the tulle together, and then I gather stitched the top of the tulle. And sewing this tulle together was a bit of annoying. It just kept like doing that thing where it grabs the bottom of it, and then I have to untangle it and sew again. I just did that like a million times while I was sewing it. But anyway, I made like a little underskirt dress thing. Now for sleeves. So I wanted my sleeves to have a pink lace trim. So I have this like pink lace and I just cut a tiny piece of it and then I glued the trim to the bottom of the sleeves with Fabri-Tac glue. I also wanted a puffy sleeve moment, so I gather stitched the top of the sleeves. I sewed the sleeve to the top of the dress, good side to good side. Just a little like sewing heads up, not that I think I should be giving anyone a sewing heads up because I barely know what I'm doing, but if you guys have never, like if you have like no experience with sewing, I would look up like a sleeve sewing tutorial because it's real confusing at first. It's just a strange process. Now to begin decorating. So I really like decorating. I sewed this tiny little piece of tulle to the top of the dress. I just sewed it right down the middle. I took a break from decorating because I decided I had to finish the dress before decorating it some more. So I actually sewed up at this stage the sides of the top of the dress. As you guys can see, it looks a little bit different. And then I sewed the top of the dress to the bottom of the dress. Once that was finished, I sewed the dress up the sides, good side to good side, and I sewed clasps on the back of the top of the dress. And this is what she looks like. She needs a little bit more pizzazz though, so I decided to fancy up a little pink bow that I had. I have this like tiny pink bow and I cut up more of that lace that I put on the sleeves. I cut like a little piece of it and I glued that to the pink bow, and then I glued a half pearl onto the middle of the lace, or right there basically. That's what her bow looks like once it's attached, but she needed some more stuff. I was really into sewing with this doll. Sometimes I get like really into sewing. I wanted to give her her wings and her tail, so I cut a pattern out for it. I sewed the wings up the side and then flipped them. To separate the wings, I stitched between them. To stuff those wings, I'm using yarn fluff that's been sitting in a bag forever that I finally get to use. Yay! To sew up the wings, I used a ladder stitch, which I did not film because I've never used a ladder stitch before, so I was kind of like, I don't know, I just forgot to film that part because I was concentrating so hard. But once I've done them, I just sewed them to the dress. Now onto the tail. So the tail is basically the same steps that the wings are, so I just sew it up the sides and then I leave the top open. I think you can kind of see the ladder stitch here. If you can't, there's tons of videos on YouTube that show how to do it. Also, Google. You can just Google and find like a website that'll show you how to do it because the internet is an amazing thing. With dark pink acrylic paint, I just painted on the swirl on the tail, and I also painted on the two lines that are on the wings. After those little details were painted on, I sewed the tail to the dress right below the wings. Now for some shoes. So these are Honey Swamp's boots. I just painted them with acrylic paint in the color scheme that Clefairy is, so pink and white. After the shoes were painted, they were coated with 2 coats of matte varnish. I sanded down the body and blushed her with the same tones that I used on her face. Taking a hairdryer, I warmed her head back up and put her head back on her body. This dress needs more bows, so I took a giant bow and I glued it to the back of the dress. For the hair, I took this little metal rod thing and I wrapped the hair around it, and then I took my flat iron and set it in place. For Clefairy's big bang thing that she has, it's like a curl, I twisted the hair and then I super glued it into a curl. Now to finally put her ears back on, I super glued her ears on that area of her head that we left with no hair. I also says to myself, it says, you know what this needs? More bows. So I gave her some bows on each ear. I decided that Clefairy needed her moonstone, so I found a pebble in the street, I cleaned it, and then I painted some wavy purple metallic and pink lines on it. I like making doll chokers out of ribbon because it's like really easy, so I made her a little pink choker and I put a pearl on it. I decided that Clefairy needed something to like hold her moonstone with, so I wrapped some thread around the moonstone and super glued it in place. That's basically everything. This is her and all her accessories, and this is what she looks like. I think she's kind of cute. Let me know what you guys think of her down below. I mean, she's my favorite Pokemon, so of course I think she's kind of cute. I want to make at least one more of these. This was like insanely fun to do. I want to make, I think, a Gengar doll. If you guys don't know the whole, well, Clefable and Gengar theory, it's kind of interesting. I recommend Googling it, but I think that they would make a really adorable pair. So I think I want to make one more Pokemon doll at least, and I want to make a Gengar doll. And I just want to thank like Dolliful, Dollmotion, Moonlight Jewel, and Doll Fairy for inspiring me to create this doll. It was a super fun experience. I hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you think of her down below. By the way, I wanted to talk really quickly about the whole FTC COPPA thing before I go. I am like basically like 90% certain that that is going to affect this channel since I make doll videos. Specifically, I'm pretty sure it's going to affect this video. I will link the petition down below. I don't think that the FTC is still accepting comments about the whole COPA thing. If you guys don't know what it is, I'll link some videos down below along with the petition. I'm basically extremely late to the party when it comes to talking about that, but I'm sorry. My life like went insane, and then YouTube went insane, and yeah. It sucks. It's unfortunate. I don't want to end this video on a negative note, but yeah. Like this video if you like this video, subscribe makes me happy, and I hope you guys are having a beautiful day. Bye.